the Ripper, a name that conjures fear, the most famous, the most iconic serial killer in history.
Yours truly, Jack the Ripper.
Before we get into the story, this is going to be one of my darkest stories covered on this channel, so you are warned. Anyways, we're going to be talking about Jack the Ripper, one of the most infamous serial killers of all time. He's mostly known for never being caught and fucking with the police. You got that right. This guy's got a pair on him, bro. This guy's got a pair on him. Jack the Ripper murdered of at least 5 women, all prostitutes, in or near Whitechapel district of London East End between August and November 1888. The 5 are considered canonical. Mary Ann Nichols found August 31st, Annie Chapman found September 8th, Elizabeth Strythe found September 30th, Catherine Eddowes found September 30th, and Mary Jane Kelly found November 9th. All but one of Jack the Ripper's victims were suicidating customers on the street. In each instances, the victim's throat was cut and the body was usually mutilated in a manner indicating that the murderer had at least some knowledge of human anatomy. On one occasion, half of a human kidney, which may have been extracted from a murder victim, was mailed to the police. The authorities also received a series of taunting notes from a person calling himself Jack the Ripper and purporting to be the murderer. Strenuous and sometimes curious efforts were made to identify and trap the killer, all to no avail. Now, there are some beliefs of a man going by the name of Aaron Kaminsky being Jack the Ripper, and people tend to believe it a lot more than the other suspects because there's a whole book on it.
Well, our next guest has made one of the biggest discoveries of the century. An armchair detective, he's solved once and for all just who Jack the Ripper was. Russell Edwards joins us now live from London. A big good morning to you, Russell.
Good morning.
Tell you what, for years this has been a murder case which has confounded detectives. Who exactly is Jack the Ripper?
Well, Jack the Ripper is a Polish Jewish immigrant that came over to London in 1881. His name is Aaron Kosminski. He lived with his family just literally not far from the murders. And shortly after the final murder, he got put into Coney Hatch Asylum, like a lunatic asylum. He stayed there for a few years and then got moved to Leavesden Asylum and died there in 1919.
And it was an incredible discovery you made, and it all hinged upon this shawl that you found that I think everyone had thought belonged to the victim, and you suddenly said, what if it actually belonged to the killer? And that was the key that unlocked the whole case. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yes, of course. Well, when I bought the shawl, I had no reason to disbelieve that it was Catherine Eddowes' shawl. But the significance of the pattern on the shawl, Michaelmas daisies, of course, Michaelmas is celebrated, in fact, it was 2 days ago on the 29th of September and the 8th of November. And lo and behold, 2 murders happened on the early hours of the 30th, so the night of the 29th, if you like. And on the 8th of November, the night, he went and murdered his final victim, and she was found in the early hours of the 9th of November. That was where it started for me. Of course, when we realised that the shawl came from Russia, we did the research with all the top places in England, Sotheby's, the V&A, Christie's, Huguenot Society, Silk's specialist in Switzerland. We cracked it, got the significant date to make sure it was around at the time of the murders. And then we had an amazing scientist named Dr. Fayez Ismail that did perform mass spectrometry on the shawl and said, look, this dye comes from St. Petersburg, which is northern Russia.
So
that was the massive revelation.
Men wearing shawls was kind of... Because what I thought was surprising was that, well, why would a man have a shawl? So this was a common thing for men in those days?
No. The thing is, he left the shawl there Well, this is the thing in the book. You'll see that the pattern of the going back to Michaelmas, he actually left that as to let everybody know the date of his next murder, and it was. It was the night of the 8th of November.
And just to explain to people, Michaelmas was, I think, a religious holiday on 2 dates, and it had the
That's right.
Michaelmas daisies were a pattern on the shawl that linked it to Michaelmas this date. This is where it gets really Da Vinci
my
Code.
God, yeah.
And the dates of Michaelmas that year coincided with 2 of the nights of the killings, 2 of the big nights of the killings.
Have you left any other clues as to dates before that?
No, not that I know of. There is no other evidence. There's no physical evidence, which is why it's always remained a mystery for now 126 years. But thank you for clarifying the dates of Michaelmas and the religious celebration, yeah.
And Russell, haven't there been previous DNA tests done and they've been inconclusive? What would you say to talk that possibly this shawl might have been tampered with since? So, in fact, it isn't by the family, so it, in fact, isn't really Jack the Ripper?
Well, thank you for asking that. Well, there was a documentary done before I had the shawl, and it was very rudimentary. Again, it was in a room in a bungalow, not scientific. The next test, which in fact I helped an Australian company, again, it was exceptionally superficial with just very, very small swabs taken, and it took like a few hours. I mean, we're talking about 3.5 years worth of work here. With all the critics that have come across, everything is completely unfounded and very spurious of what they're saying. It's completely just has no foundation and no fact to it whatsoever. So Dr. Jari Lohalainen that conducted this fantastic DNA research, we both really just, we don't really need to answer these people because what they're saying is just absolutely unfounded and just nonsense, really.
All right, Russell Edwards, thank you very much for joining us today. We appreciate it. Such a fascinating... Yeah.
Now, these are his words. I've spent 14 years working on it, and we have definitely solved the mystery of who Jack the Ripper was. Aaron Kaminski, a 23-year-old Polish immigrant who ended up dying in an asylum. He was definitely categorically, I said that so fucking wrong. It's so wrong. Categorically and absolutely the man behind the grisly killing spree in 1888 in London's East Side.